Can remove it if you'd like. I can lift it up and move it. This is what I need to take questions. Yes, major problem. Don't do that because then it'll lock. If you can do it from holding your remarks or okay. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Vincent Iolenti, a social scientist at the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Integrated Waste Management. DOE just wrapped up a very productive and stimulating working meeting with the consent-based siting consortia right here in Cleveland, Ohio. Shortly, we'll be opening up the floor for public questions from you, the online audience. Here with us today, we have representatives from the Department of Energy, and we also have representatives from the consent-based siting consortia project teams. This is the second installment of our consent-based siting consortia interactive public webinar series. A recording of our July 25th webinar can be found on our website at energy.gov/consent-based siting. That recording features remarks from Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm, as well as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Energy, Dr. Michael Goff. For today's virtual open house webinar, we'll be inviting our audience to ask questions directly to consortia representatives. So the questions you ask can be directed at DOE, but we'll be prioritizing opportunities for the consortia to respond and interact with the public. And we'll get started in just a few minutes. But before we do, I'd like to provide some guidance and tips that will help you ask questions. First of all, resource links on how to ask questions will be shared via the chat feature on your screen. These should be accessible at the bottom of your screen. Due to the virtual nature of this webinar, I'd like to ask you to type your questions in that Q&A box. The Q&A box usually appears at the bottom of your screen, but if you're using a phone, it might appear at the top. We'll have a dedicated Q&A session after some remarks, and we'll try to keep time to answer as many of the questions that you submit as possible. But given the time limitation, we may not have time to answer every single question today. Instructions on where to send unanswered or follow-up questions will be provided in the chat. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded. It'll be made available on our website in due course, on the same place that you can currently find the first installment, the kickoff webinar series, which is also on our website. So now I'll pass it off to Dr. Erica Bickford, the Director for Integrated Waste Management in DOE's Office of Nuclear Energy. Erica.
Thank you, Vincent. All right, good afternoon, everyone. And thanks very much for joining us for today's Consent-Based Siting Consortia Virtual Open House. As Vincent mentioned, the purpose of today's webinar is really for the public to ask questions of our consortia members. So I want to keep my remarks pretty short and just provide a little bit of opening information for you. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, DOE is currently implementing a consent-based siting process to site one or more federal consolidated interim storage facilities for storing commercial spent nuclear fuel that was generated by nuclear power production. The communities that we intend to participate in this consent-based siting process will be voluntary, and we'll work through collaboratively through a series of stages and phases with the department. So this is a process that we're working to, and we're at the very beginning of that process. So as part of our first stage of consent-based siting, we're really focused on public communication, information exchange, and engagement. And to support those activities, DOE has recently funded and awarded 12 groups of university, nonprofit, and public sector partners to work with communities to build capacity to engage in discussions about nuclear technology and spent nuclear fuel and nuclear fuel management. Facilitate mutual learning. We want to learn from you all out there as much as you may want to learn from us. And we want to get public input into this process as we move forward. We're calling this group of awardees that are sitting before me today our consent-based siting consortia. We have 12 awardees, and each awardee has roughly $2 million that they'll be funded with over a 2-year period to conduct projects in support of informing and implementing the consent-based siting process. They'll serve as engagement, information, and research hubs for the communities or groups that they engage with. They'll provide, some of them will provide direct grants to communities wanting to learn more. And one of our goals as the Department of Energy for the results of the consortia, or for the process that they move through, is really to support a national dialogue about spent nuclear fuel management, about where this material comes from, how we manage it now, what the long-term solutions for future management are for it. I want to emphasize again that this is our first stage of our consent-based siting process, and we are really focused on public communication and engagement. We are not currently seeking sites. The awardees that we have and the communities that they may engage with are providing information to the process. They are not necessarily sites that may be pursued in the future for hosting federal facilities. That's going to come later in stage 2. So right now, stage 1 is focused on process and developing and implementing the process. And then the next stage, we'll start looking at seeking volunteers to express interest in hosting a facility. For more background on these efforts and for contact information for reaching out to our 12 consortia, you can find information at energy.gov/consent-based siting. There's summary information on each of the awardees and their projects. For the purposes of today's webinar, I'm going to briefly introduce each of our 12 consortium members and their projects, and then we'll move directly into the Q&A, and you can ask questions directly to them. So first, in alphabetical order, American Nuclear Society will work with the South Carolina University's Research and Education Foundation and 4 minority-serving institutions. They'll explore attitudes and values towards transportation and interim storage of spent nuclear fuel and high-level waste. Expected results from their project include a collaboration hub for constructive decision-making. Next, we have Arizona State University, who will work with local community partners to employ a method called Expert and Citizen Assessment of Science and Technology, or ECAST. They will consult and engage communities to assess public values. The goal is to create a test bed for public engagement, innovations, and capacity building that can be scaled to state and national levels. Next, we have Boise State University, who is partnering with the National Tribal Energy Association and 7 universities to establish a Western-centered collaborative hub, or a network of networks. The network of networks will be made up of communities with historical experience in nuclear technology, nuclear waste experts, and communities interested in learning about consent-based siting. Next, we have Clemson University, who is partnering with South Carolina University's Research and Education Foundation to engage in nuclear waste dialogue with South Carolina and Georgia communities. They will do this, they will be launching a series of public funding opportunities to support community action. Anticipated outcomes are tools, resource kits, and processes for robust stakeholder engagement and empowerment that are representative of diverse communities. We also have the Energy Community Alliance, who plans to develop a framework for interacting with communities on storage and disposal of spent nuclear fuel and high-level radioactive waste. They plan to host roundtables, issue community grants, provide technical assistance, and facilitate peer exchanges. The intended outcomes are to build trust and create a shared understanding of consent. Good Energy Collective is partnering with University of Notre Dame to help identify 4 to 5 communities interested in learning about the benefits and challenges of hosting a federal consolidated interim storage facility. The goal is to use geospatial tools to build capacity for the federal government to conduct successful community engagement. Holtec International is partnering with University of Florida, McMahon Communications, Agenda Global, American Nuclear Society, and the Nuclear Energy Institute. The consortium will develop community-specific outreach plans. Anticipated outcomes include long-lasting, meaningful community relationships. Keystone Policy Center is working with the Social and Environmental Research Institute, National Association of Regional Councils, and GDF Watch. They will build knowledge and facilitate peer-to-peer learning to empower communities to engage on consent-based siting policy. They will accomplish this by hosting regional workshops, providing direct grants to communities, and developing situational assessments. Next, we have Missouri University of Science and Technology, who is partnering with Taylor Geospatial Institute and 3 other universities to identify public perceptions of consent-based siting. They are using an engagement process called Assessment After Engagement, Education, and Experiential Learning, or A-EEE. North Carolina State University is partnering with Mothers for Nuclear, the Tribal Consent-Based Coalition, and the Northern Chumash nonprofit in California to engage with interested communities. To accomplish this, the consortium will lead a series of public meetings in urban areas, as well as many smaller venues interacting with Native American communities. Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, along with the Schenectady Foundation, will develop a community engagement toolkit for DOE's consent-based siting process. They'll do so through a participatory design process and evaluation of strategies for community engagement and mutual learning. The anticipated outcomes are a detailed guide of best practices for community-centered design, adaptable models for risk scenarios, plans for community engagement events, and learning modules. Last but not least, we have Vanderbilt University, who will work with Rutgers University and Oregon State University to engage communities and tribal nations near existing DOE-owned nuclear waste management facilities. They will foster mutual learning to understand the best and worst tribal and community engagement practices for risk-informed decision-making. So those are the 12 project teams that comprise the consent-based siting consortia. I should add that we anticipate that the consortia will continue to change the landscape of this map as they engage with more communities and partners and as their projects move forward. We're very excited to see what they will accomplish over the next 2 years. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to our virtual open house Q&A moderator, Dr. Vincent Iolenti. Thank you all.
Thank you, Erica. So today's virtual open house Q&A session will continue from now until 5 p.m. Eastern time. As a reminder, everyone in the online public audience is encouraged to ask questions posed directly to consortia representatives themselves. Feel free, or it can be questions broadly to the consortia, or they can be to the DOE representatives in the room too. So we'll try to field as many questions from the virtual attendees as we can. Please try to keep your questions in the QA box limited to really questions only, so we can do our best to answer as many questions as possible in the time we have together. Given the time limitation, we may not have time to address every single question. For unanswered follow-up or future questions, please send them to the email address provided in the chat. Okay, let's dive in. So the first question is for Keystone Consortium. So this will go to Tom Webler. So you're part of a consortia that brings together folks from academia, government, think tanks, nonprofits, private sector, and beyond. What do you think will be some of the most challenging aspects of the next 2 years for the consortia and for your consortium in particular, Tom?
The most challenging aspects for the next 2 years? I think the most challenging aspect will be to build relationships with numerous communities that can find the time to really sit down and engage with us. We recognize that communities are very busy, and that's the purpose of the grant funding. That our grant will be giving out a significant amount of money as capacity building grants to allow regional government organizations and communities to pay for staff time and to pay stipends for people, regular citizens who show up at meetings and workshops. We know people have children, they have jobs, they have busy lives, there's other things going on in their lives, and this is an imposition. But we're coming to you to learn from you and to help channel what you know to the Department of Energy, so that when they do get around to building their consent-based or to running their consent-based siting process, they'll be doing it with information they've learned from local communities. So we recognize that a huge expenditure of our time will be spent building relationships with as many communities as we feasibly can, and organizing meetings and traveling to visit you over the next 24 months or so. And that we can't get to everybody, we can't get everywhere, but we're going to try to achieve geographic and other types of diversity, try to get to different places, reach different types of communities. So I think that's really, you know, we're pretty good about our skill set, what we can do, what we can bring to the picture, but building these partnerships to work with communities is the thing that will take the most effort.
Thank you, Tom. So would anyone like to continue upon that, or should we proceed to the next question? Okay, sounds good. Tom summed it up very well. So another question from someone in the online audience. This might be a trickier one. So this is for the room. Whoever would like to volunteer this one is free to do so. So the question is the purpose of the consent-based siting plan to buy time for DOE and politicians? And how does the consent-based siting consortia figure into this? Do we have a plan B? So who would like to field that one? We have one right here. And we have
yeah, Jim Olson, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. I can't speak on behalf of the DOE as far as buying time goes. What I can say is it's buying us a lot of time to have some really hard conversations in our community that we've been wanting to have for a long time. So we'll steal a quote from our partner, the Schenectady Foundation, where he said his interest in this effort is to develop a process to solve really hard problems. And nuclear waste is one of those, as an example. So again, can't speak to the Department of Energy what their goals are, but we're thankful for the opportunity for our time.
Thank you. We have another question in the front.
Again, I'll repeat that we don't represent DOE. We don't know what DOE's mission is, but I think it's a good step forward is to learn before moving. I am going to study a site, which is legacy site, completely opposite of consent base. They did not know it was a wartime. And of course, that was not a good experience. So we should look at it as a positive step that DOE wants to reach out to community before taking any steps.
All right. Thank you for that. Another online question is, were each of the 12 awardees granted 12 million? No, each of the awardees, sorry to disappoint the awardees in the room. It was 2 million, or around 2 million is the number given to the 12 awardees for the funding opportunity announcement that we released. So that was a quick one. I can answer that one from DOE. So another one is a key goal of DOE's consent-based siting consortia effort is to build capacity in communities. This can mean all sorts of different things. It's a very nebulous category, isn't it? For some people, it can. So I'd like an idea for the virtual online audience of what does building capacity mean in the context of your specific consortia? And how does this relate to the idea of ensuring principles of environmental justice are embedded in the consent-based siting process and in the federal consolidated interim storage of spent nuclear fuel? This is for anyone.
This is Shoaib Usman from Missouri University of Science and Technology. Our community that we are going to reach out to is a legacy site community. Of course, we don't expect community members to be an expert in radiation measurements and effects of radiation on human body and things like that. But we would like to share enough for them to dig out more what kind of resources are out there in public, like ICRP webpage and NRC and DOE and EPA, and decipher that information at their own. If we are able to reach that point that at least 1% or 0.5% of community members are open to the idea of searching themselves, I think we have achieved a lot. They'll carry on and build on their knowledge. And this is our capacity building, in my view.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Kara Colton from Energy Communities Alliance.
Thanks. I would just say that you have to be understanding what you are consenting to in order to provide enduring consent. And so what we are trying to do is ensure that people have the information and the knowledge that they need and they want to make a decision that they feel comfortable making, whether it's to go forward or whether they don't have interest necessarily in a interim storage facility.
Right. Sure, and this is for Lindsay.
Hi, Lindsay Schuler-Nichols, Clemson University. I wanted to reiterate something that Tom said, and I think it answers some of this question as well, is part of being able to build the capacity is being able to fund people to engage in the conversation. And so whether it's learning more about a topic area or just having a conversation, more broadly speaking, about community interest related to nuclear waste management. I think that something that the project as a whole does is enables the DOE and the communities that are involved to have funding to bring people to the table that maybe aren't already funded to do so.
All right, thank you. So this is one for the Department of Energy. The question is Yucca Mountain still an option? So this will go to the Director of the Office of Integrated Waste Management, Erica Bickford.
Hello, this is Erica Bickford. Thanks for the question. The department has determined that Yucca Mountain's not a workable site, largely from a public acceptance standpoint. It's long been opposed by the state of Nevada, and that's when, following the discontinuation of that project under the direction of the president at the time, a Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future was stood up, and out of that effort came several recommendations. Among them was that the department should pursue interim storage in addition to new sites for geologic repositories and follow a consent-based siting process to do so. And so that's what leads us to be where we're at today, pursuing consent-based siting for a federal consolidated interim storage facility.
Thank you, Erica. So another question, this one is from the audience. Do we have a representative from Good Energy Collective here? Raise your hand. So this is a question for you. Given the direct and substantial indirect financial and professional interest of many of the awardee entities that they have in promoting the nuclear power industry, this is a question from the online audience, an industry that actually creates more waste as they move forward with their own efforts. How can anyone trust in the integrity of this process?
Well, so the integrity of this process is going to be borne out by the consortium members here. And I think we've all gotten into this process to engage in a good faith process with the communities that we're working with. So I'm really hoping that the communities feel that we can build trust with them in our process and ensure that they feel like their voices have been heard at the end of it, and that DOE actually hears their voices in that process. Excellent.
So someone in the online audience would also like to know, this is another question. So how do you plan to engage communities around the issue of transgenerational justice? We at DOE do a lot of social science research on intergenerational justice and how we can best achieve that, looking forward to this project, which has rather long time horizons. So the audience member flags how nuclear waste is ultimately a multi-millennial issue. But even for a consolidated interim storage facility, the same group that initially grants consent might not be the community that exists for the duration of the facility. And as a cultural anthropologist, I mean, this makes a lot of sense. Communities are fluid. The political leadership in a community can change over time, the composition, people move in, people move out. So the question is, how can we ensure that the consent that we may or may not achieve from one community today is durable and lasting into future generations? Do we have ideas from the consortia?
Jim Olson, Rensselaer Polytechnic again. Our community has the advantage of having been in the nuclear technology game since the beginning. So we have certain community members who've suffered both disproportionately in a negative way and a positive way as well. So one of the things we're hoping to achieve is engaging those that have been disproportionately burdened, understanding what their issues and challenges are. And then for any future sites that are interested in nuclear infrastructure technology, they can leverage those best practices and lessons learned to avoid those issues. As far as nuclear waste being a millennial problem, not to get too technical yet, but we do plan on getting very technical throughout this process. The history of actual nuclear technology development could be leveraged in a few ways. And I'll thank the Department of Energy for their consent-based siting process to allow dialogue on different researches, energy options, different reactor sites. From a conceptual discussion perspective, you know, we plan to ask the question and hopefully get some answers. How could the nuclear infrastructure itself change to address the waste we're generating? It could be less, and potentially more effective ways of utilization could occur.
Okay, we have one follow-up from here.
I would like, this is Shoaib Usman again from Missouri S&T. I would like to draw a parallel between this concept of storage of spent nuclear fuel. I'm not calling it waste purposefully. Any other engineering project, say building a dam on a river, would have some social cost. There will be community who will have to relocate themselves because their homes will become underwater soon. But hopefully, if it is done right, most of the cost is upfront, and those communities who have paid for it by moving away from their heritage homes and things like that have consent to it, and rest of it will be mostly, not all, but mostly benefit of that.
All right, thank you. So another audience question. This one is for Boise State. Do we have Kathy here? Kathy Arujo. So will your consortium exchange information, findings, best practices, et cetera? Will these be publicly accessible? Or what will you do with the outcomes of the work you're doing?
Great, thanks for the question. My name is Kathy Arujo. I'm with the Case Energy Policy Institute at Boise State. We actually already have a website that was publicly launched, so you can find that on the Energy Policy Institute's website, and that is www.boisestate.edu/EPI/consent-based-siting. Again, it rolls just right off the tongue. And so that'll be the best place to be learning what we're doing, and we appreciate that question. We will be evolving with this as we go, so we embrace this from the standpoint that there's going to be a lot of learning happening. And so that website will have sort of generalized summaries of what we're finding on the ground, but feel free to also reach out to us, and we're happy to talk more. Thanks for the question.
Okay. Thanks. And if any of the other consortia would like to answer that with respect to theirs, if there's any public deliverable or public presence or public output from your work that you're particularly excited or interested in sharing, feel free to chime in and let us know. We have David from University of Maryland.
Which is actually, I'm part of the Arizona State Consortium.
Right.
So we'll be running a series of public forums around this issue, and so all those forums there will be reports, and all the things that people say will be public information. So.
Excellent. So the next question is, can you give an overview of what happened during the working meeting that we just had? That I'll field that one because I sat through the thing. Yes, we are in Cleveland, Ohio. We are every 3 months, the consent-based citing consortia representatives and DOE representatives meet up in geographically roving locales, and we discuss updates. So we hear from each of the 12 awardees about the progress they've made in the past 90 days and the progress they're looking forward to making in the next 90 days. So they give about 15-minute presentations. We discuss with them, we learn from them. It's an effort in mutual learning, and it's a fascinating group. The department has learned a lot from these discussions. It's been great. Another thing we do at these meetings, this particular time over in Cleveland, we had a session in engaging with stakeholders in a sympathetic and empathetic way, and we sort of practiced different approaches to listening to what people are telling us, folks from state, local, tribal governments. We discussed some historical injustices and the fact that there's many stories out there that need to be told that haven't been told, and how the consortia can create a space for people to tell these stories and for us to listen to them and then move forward with a way to site this federal consolidated interim storage facility in a way that meets the needs of communities and people. So we've done sort of scenario planning exercises at this event. We've done brainstorming exercises. We've gotten to know each other, and it can be challenging at times. We're speaking across sectors. We're speaking across disciplines. We're speaking across all sorts of divides and lines in American society, but we're trying to congeal into a community of practice or a cohort that can go out and create this conversation for the next 2 years and build capacity and see how we can learn and implement an actionable solution to something that's really been an issue in the United States for several decades right now. So that's the answer to that. We plan to, we hope to, we aspire to have a public component to each of these quarterly meetings every 3 months that we have. So I hope that was a satisfying answer. That was directed to me, not the consortia, I believe. So now we can get back to the consortium. So this one, is this for federal consolidated interim storage facilities, or could this also be for a permanent repository, this public engagement effort? That is a question from our online audience. And maybe Juan Uribe could be a good person to answer that. And Juan is a federal manager and senior manager in the Office of Integrated Waste Management, the consent-based citing team at the Department of Energy.
Thank you, Vincent. Again, my name is Juan Uribe, Senior Program Manager. The current effort is focused on federal consolidated interim storage facility. But we do recognize that there are some lessons learned that are generally applicable to other facilities. But right now, the focus is on a federal consolidated interim storage facility for commercial spent nuclear fuel.
Right. So another question is, how many communities have expressed interest in hosting radioactive waste? And this is actually an interesting one because we are currently in the first stage of the consent-based citing process. I encourage folks from our online audience to go on our website and check out our report, the consent-based citing process document. We are currently in a stage called planning and capacity building, where we're really trying to start a discussion and listen to folks and hear what they have to say. So along the way, people might say, hey, you know, I'm pretty interested in this. Hey, I'm interested, but we're not doing anything formal until the national call for volunteers comes. And that's going to come in stage 2 of this. After we're done this, we think at DOE that it's worth investing in the conversation. It's worth investing in the question of how can we build trust? How can we sort of create conversations across lines that are often not bridged? And that's why we have the consortia. That's why we have the 12 incredibly talented and multifaceted entities in this room today. And once we're done with that, a couple of years, we're going to issue a national call for volunteers. We hope that the consent that we are pursuing is an informed consent based on mutual learning. So the time really hasn't come for that yet. I think that we have to have a lot of discussions and make sure that everyone's on the same page before we can really go out and, confidently say, let's move forward. So thank you for that question, and we hope to be answering it in future stages of the consent-based citing process. Okay, so one more for anyone in the consortia. So there exist across the country many small, local, but passionate nuclear advocacy individuals and groups. Are any of the consortia members that have plans to engage with these existing pro-nuclear groups in their relationship development efforts? Okay, so this question, I believe, is asking, are there any folks who are part of this consortia who have plans to engage with pro-nuclear advocacy groups? And if so, how are you going to navigate the tricky question of how one might carefully go between these two spaces of community engagement and being in touch with folks in industry? And I think that this is a good question for Holtec International to answer as our private sector representative.
I guess
how are you going to navigate this?
No, it's an interesting question. Obviously, in our operational side, in parts of our business, we do interact with pro-nuclear organizations. Generation Atomic comes to mind as one that we've worked with in the past. But there's a place, I think, for those groups to be proactive and help educate. I think that's the key piece that needs to be shown, is really the science and the facts. And these type of third-party kind of independent groups will be key in providing kind of a different viewpoint than the local community or the I don't want to call it the big bad corporate role, but they really have a place in there that can help balance and bring some balance to the topics.
Thanks. Excellent. All right, we have a lot of questions up here coming in. So, okay, so one online audience member asks, the primary way to make a community feel engaged and in control of their future around a potential nuclear site in their community is addressing the power differential between community, state, industry, and federal officials. Not everyone is going here in a lateral situation. Not everyone's going here with the same historical circumstances, the same baggages, same privileges, the same levels of access to people in the highest rungs of power across the country. So how will your consortia address these power differentials? And this is a question that is posed to Energy Communities Alliance. So perhaps we could get an answer from that. Energy Communities Alliance, could we get an answer to that? Yeah, the question is, how will you address the power differential between community, state, industry, and federal officials as you move forward with public engagement?
Thank you for the question, Carol Colton from the Energy Communities Alliance. By trying to introduce holistic conversations, not any one group is going to be able to move the ball forward alone. Everybody is going to have some aspect of participation. You're going to have a private sector perhaps building the facility. You have the federal government that's going to own the facility. You're going to have the local government that hosts the facility. You're going to have nearby local governments who feel impacted by the facility, as well as tribal governments. So I think any opportunity that the Energy Communities Alliance has to have holistic conversations, that is going to be our focus. Most of our meetings are going to be open to everyone. We have webinars constantly that are publicly open for anybody as well. And then we're looking to engage not only with communities that are ECA members, but communities that don't have the history that some of our communities have around nuclear. So I would really encourage folks to contact us if you are interested in being part of our meetings. Our website has our next couple of meetings that are posted there, and you can also sign up for our newsletter to find out when we're planning to have these conversations. And that website is a little bit easier than Boise's, and that is www.energyca.org.
Right. Okay, so now we have a question for NC State. So maybe we could go over to them. So how will your group, especially as you engage with communities that have facilities that produce nuclear waste, how will you convey the longevity and health hazards or potential health hazards of spent nuclear fuel to folks? And how are you taking this into account? And how is this influencing who you'll partner with as you move forward? So this is a question for NC State.
Thank you. I'm Ryan Pickering with Mothers for Nuclear. I'm here with TCBC as well. We're both representing North Carolina State. So I'll speak to the structure of how we're thinking about this is, we want to present ourselves as members of the public because we are, and, listen and understand the groups that we're addressing. And we're open to addressing a wide variety of groups. We have a mandate to talk with tribal groups as well. But after we, kind of break bread together, we do have a radiation health expert who's going to be making a presentation and really get into the basics and even beyond the basics, if that's where the conversation leads, because we really think that we can overcome fear through understanding, trust, and patience. And Scott, would you like to add anything to that?
Scott Lathrop with the TCBC. I think what is really important about that overall question is really zeroing in on the person's concern. What is the health hazard? And trying to bring facts to that and not just what we hear, or we might have a fear of a certain thing. So trying to really get to the detail of that and weigh that. Is it a plus? Is it a minus? We're not trying to convince anybody of one way or another. We're trying to get the information out that is scientific and true, if you will, the true facts.
The true facts. All right, thank you. All right, so this next one is a question for DOE. We'll give this one to Erica and Juan. Start with Erica. So an audience member asks, why don't you include the sites already approved by NRC in Texas and New Mexico? These are the Holtec and ISP projects in your consent-based siting process. And then they ask, or are they already included in your consent-based siting process?
Sure, this is Erica Bickford from the U.S. Department of Energy. So what kicked off this iteration of consent-based siting was congressional direction authorization that we received starting in fiscal year 2021, which specifically directed the department to pursue siting a federal consolidated interim storage facility using a consent-based siting process. Those other facilities that were mentioned in the question are not federal facilities, and so that's why our process is focused on other sites.
And this is Juan Uribe. He'll give it a comment too.
No, just quickly add, I do think that there are obviously a lot of parallel insights and lessons to be learned from those efforts as well. So I think that we are obviously keeping an eye out as a department in what's happening there and trying to leverage some of the things that we learn in our process as well. So,
right. Thank you very much. Is a representative from Mothers for Nuclear here? Oh, is he? Oh, there he is, right there, right in front. Yes. So the question is, how will you deal with community hostility? People might not always be for nuclear. There might be mothers against nuclear. So who?
Yes. I'm still formulating my opinion about nuclear, and I'm curious to hear how people think about it. So I think as a nation, as a species, we're all kind of grappling with this. And that's why I'm so thankful for this opportunity that we can have these public documented forums, because we should be having these conversations as a community. So I think, the doors are open, and you know, as long as everything's in good faith, which I've never seen any evidence otherwise, you know, let's have these conversations, and we look forward to welcoming you to our to some of our consortium meetings. And I'm sure I speak for everyone else with that sentiment. That's what I've seen here today.
All right, thank you for that. And there's actually a lot of questions about this. So plenty of folks online are interested in the possibility of sub-grants being issued by the consortia entities we have here today. So just maybe a show of hands, who has a very sort of near-term plan to issue sub-grants to communities and smaller organizations? Maybe you could tell folks about that. Let's start with Lindsay.
We are still working on getting our subcontract in place, but we do have a near to short-term plan for subcontracts for seed funding throughout our region of interest, which is South Carolina and then all the neighboring counties. We have the plan is to have a few different types of funding opportunities. The one is a community action, we're calling community action and engagement awards, where it's a smaller pot of money for hosting an event, a smaller scale, basically, type of interaction within a local community. So right now we've set it at $10,000, and we'll have an open proposal, and we'll have some workshops to go through some of the logistics of applying and what the metrics are for receiving awards. And then we also we'll have a few larger scale funding opportunities on the order of $100,000. We have a few of those. Ahead of that announcement will be it's funny to say capacity building because we keep using that expression, but capacity building awards for entities within the region that maybe don't already have formulated ideas or the capacity to have or haven't had conversations about where they would go with their work, or what their community is really interested in regards to consolidated waste management. And so we're going to have a period of time coming up in early 2024 where we have we're calling it grant writing workshops, but it's really just to have conversations to help people shape their proposals so that we have the opportunity to review, and we'll have a committee to review some proposals that have clear metrics and clear deliverables.
Excellent. So we have another question from over here, I believe, on this right side, this far right. Is that correct? Another answer to the question. Okay, so we can have Kara Colton answer too, because Energy Communities Alliance is taking the lead on these subgrants as well.
Yes, we are also planning to offer about 50% of our grant funding out to communities. They'll be rolling grants because we want to make sure that we are getting and the community is getting the results that they want through their work. Basically, we are coming up right now. We actually have a draft of the grant application. So we are going to finish that up, and we are pulling together a multidisciplinary group of folks to help look at those grants to ensure that we are getting the most bang and you guys are getting the most bang for the buck.
Okay. Excellent, thank you. So another question is, I can relate to this one, is about the integration of social science into the consent-based siting process. So this is a fundamentally socio-technical problem. There's political dimensions, there's economic dimensions, there's technical dimensions, regulatory dimensions, and so on. And so the Department of Energy has indeed hired 3 social scientists to be on the federal team, cultural anthropologist, myself. I've spent many years studying nuclear organizations from an ethnographic perspective. We have a human geographer, we have an experimental psychologist, and we have this rather large program at the national laboratories using social science. to get insights and try to make sure that our consent-based siting process is aligned with both evidence we're hearing on the ground, things communities are saying to us, and also the principles of environmental justice and that are aware of historical contingencies. So this is a question to Marissa Bell, one of our leads from the Department of Energy, who manages a lot of the projects at the national laboratories about this. So how is DOE integrating social science into the consent-based siting program?
Thank you, Vincent. So again, this is Marissa Bell, social scientist and program manager for the consent-based siting team. I also lead the social science strategy for our program. And so I think that, Vincent, you touched on sort of key points. I think that so the first way is that by having social scientists and social science expertise on the team, we're able to sort of integrate the latest research and also going back. So like previous research and in the social science arena and taking that knowledge and making sure that we're sort of integrating it into development of the siting process and various ways that we're, you know, informing community engagement practices, informing various forms of, as Vincent said, environmental justice. And in addition, Vincent alluded to the wide sort of portfolio of social science research that we have at the labs, which spans a sort of a variety of disciplinary, it's really sort of a transdisciplinary program across multiple national labs. And so taking all of that and then sort of translating it into the process. I would also add that our consortia have a wide sort of expertise from the social sciences and across disciplines. And so over the course of 2 years, we'll be sort of taking a lot of those findings and even sort of looking at the methods and taking those and in conjunction with expertise both on the team at DOE and the wider national lab, making sure that that we're integrating those lessons learned at every stage of the process.
Right. And I understand, I mean, a lot of the consortia awardees have really fascinating social science inflected elements themselves. Maybe we could hear from RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, about some of the ways that you're taking sort of ethnographic and social scientific methods and moving them forward with your consortia efforts in parallel with DOE and their national laboratory efforts.
Sure, yeah, Brandon Costello-Kuhn with Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. I guess in the biggest picture way, I see social science as being pretty skilled at kind of understanding the big picture and understanding contextual factors. So there's a lot of very detailed technical things that matter a lot in this whole process, but there's also historical factors and cultural factors and many others. And so I come from a background in anthropology, and that relatively holistic approach helps us understand the context we're working in, but because this is an applied project, we're also using those methods to create new contexts, right? So clearly there's a lot of contextual factors that have been very, very challenging for a long time. And so we really need to create new spaces for engagement and kind of redesign existing spaces that have not been working very well.
All right, thank you very much. And we're waiting for another question to pop up here. Oh, here's a good one. So if a community audience member asks, is not involved with this first stage of a consent-based siting process, can they become involved later? And the answer to that is absolutely. So we're spending these coming 2 years building capacity and planning and engaging with communities and focusing on mutual learning. We're hoping to have a large national dialogue, but folks can, yes, certainly raise their hand later on at later stages of the consent-based siting process, perhaps stage 2 is called site assessment and screening, and that's when the national call will occur. If people become interested then, and after getting some more information or thinking about the various possible ways to negotiate benefits and et cetera, then yeah, sure, We'd love to be in dialogue with folks then. What's important to us is that we're building knowledge across the country right now for the next few months without having that burdensome question of, would you like to host, yes or no, sign on the dotted line. We're taking it slow because a slow and long sustained period of public engagement is the best way to a durable consent agreement that lasts, or at least that's the approach that we are taking. So we have time for one more question. So this is for anyone who would like to answer it. And the question is, okay, so there are many different definitions of the word community. Can mean a lot of different things to different people. Where is the bounds? Where does it begin? Where does it end? Does it change? There's a lot of different definitions of consent, right? Like, is it the mayor that says I consent? Is it a poll among the community? Is it, what if there's a referendum? Is it a citizen assembly that decides this? Who decides what consent means for a community? And we discussed that a little bit in our last public webinar appearance. But now we have a question from the audience. So how does DOE and the consortia define interim in this case? Because that can mean different things to different people. We are, of course, creating a federal consolidated interim storage facility. And ultimately, we have aspirations for a pathway to final disposal in a deep geologic repository, though currently we are authorized by Congress to focus on consolidated interim storage. So maybe we could get some feedback on what does interim mean to you in this context. So we'll give first round goes to the consortia, if anyone would like to discuss that a bit. So what does interim mean in this context? Right there.
Hi, Jim Olson, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. For us, we're looking at interim storage similar to when you fly. Most of the time, you land at an interim airport. Depending on where the future technology goes, we may find ourselves in a position where an operating nuclear site will ship its waste to an interim site and have its storage and do whatever it needs to do to transfer to either a long-term repository, if that is ever brought on site, or to a research facility or reprocessing center, et cetera, if that ever comes on site. So for us, the interim storage facility is two parts. The facility is more of a going concern, so the communities have the ability, like an airport does, to manage the traffic that flows through it. There's nothing in our worldview where the interim storage just has the waste sit there waiting for something to happen. We're looking at it to be a dynamic operational facility.
Thanks. Oh, we have another one right there.
David Tomlin from the Arizona State Consortium.
Yeah.
I guess in my mind, and this may be a little naive, but I'm wondering if it's part of the consent-based siting process, the community is deciding what interim means.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, in my mind, kind of how I feel about it.
This is Kara Colton with the Energy Communities Alliance, and we think that that's a really good approach as well, that it should be up to the host community, the host state, as to what they are comfortable with in terms of agreement to have a consolidated interim storage facility there. And as far as the community question goes, absolutely, the community is broad. It not necessarily how I would define my community is how Eric might define the community. And because of that, you have to have iterative engagement, and you have to go to multiple channels, and you have to recognize that every community, if you will, using that in the smallest sense, trusts certain people, has different avenues for communication. And I think it's up to us as the consortia to find all of those things out and do our very, very best to ensure we're getting to all of the people who consider themselves part of a given community.
All right, thank you. Those were extremely compelling and thought-provoking answers. I'll answer one more question. That was a pitch to DOE. I think I can field this one quite quickly. The question from the audience is, does DOE already have a site picked out? And is it possible that the consortia are not being kept apprised of this? And the short answer is no, we don't have a site already picked out. We have I encourage you to look at the a consent-based siting process document to see that eventually we'll go towards site screening and selection and kind of down select sites based on scientific considerations and social considerations and economic considerations. But we absolutely do not have a site already picked out. So that I can say with certainty. So anyway, those are the questions we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining us. This was live from our second consent-based siting consortia working meeting right here in Cleveland. So if you're online and tuning in, feel free to send us any follow-up questions to the email address that the amazing comms team we have is about to drop in the chat section. Or you can just visit our website. We have a new consent-based siting consortia landing page. And the landing page actually has information about each of the awardees, as Erica mentioned, and also has contact information for each of the PIs. So if you have questions that you feel aren't even for DOE, that are just for a particular consortia that you heard on from today, feel free to reach out to them. They're in for the PI, principal investigator, for the site's email address can be found on the consent-based siting consortia landing page. So we appreciate your interest in consent-based siting, and we look forward to further engagement in the future. So thank you very much from the U.S. Department of Energy.